Early Friday morning, March 20th, 2026, emergency sirens began blaring across Oahu's north shore. The message was simple: leave now. A dam built in 1906, rated as high hazard potential by the state of Hawaii, was at imminent risk of failure. More than 5,000 people were told to evacuate immediately. The water level inside that dam had risen from 79 feet to over 85 feet in less than 12 hours. Maximum capacity, 90 feet. That means the margin of safety, the distance between controlled flow and total collapse, was 5 feet. And here's the part that should make you furious. The state of Hawaii has been warning the company that owns that dam about critical safety deficiencies since 2009. The company is Dole Food, and in 17 years, they never made the required repairs. This is the story of how Hawaii's worst flooding in more than 20 years nearly turned into one of the deadliest infrastructure disasters in modern American history. And it is the story of how a corporate giant and a state government both failed the people who live downstream. Hawaii just got hit by back-to-back storms. The first one, a Kona low weather system, dumped heavy rain across the islands the week of March 13th. Soil was already saturated. Rivers were running high. And then, 1 week later, a second storm rolled in. This one hit Oahu hard. Parts of the North Shore received between 8 and 12 inches of rain in less than 24 hours. That is half a foot of water falling out of the sky onto ground that could not absorb any more. The result was catastrophic flooding. Muddy brown water covered entire neighborhoods. Cars floated down streets. Roads turned into rivers. And in the town of Waialua, about 17 miles northwest of Honolulu, the Wahiawa Dam began to fill faster than it ever had before. By 5:35 a.m. on Friday, March 20th, the Honolulu Department of Emergency Management issued an evacuation order for Waialua and Halewa. The message used the words, imminent failure. That is not language emergency managers use lightly. It means the structure could give way at any moment. At 9 a.m., officials clarified. The dam had not yet failed, but it was at imminent risk of failure, with the potential for life-threatening flooding in all downstream areas. More than 5,500 people were in the evacuation zone. Traffic was gridlocked. Some roads were already underwater. Residents were told to carpool if possible, because there was no guarantee everyone would make it out in time. Governor Josh Green described the situation as a touch-and-go day. He said the state was just beginning recovery from a pair of massive storms that had unleashed up to 4 feet of rain in parts of Oahu and Maui over the past week. This was the state's most serious flooding since 2004, when homes and a University of Hawaii library were swamped. But this time, there was an added threat. A dam that state regulators have known for decades was vulnerable. The Wahiawa Dam is what is called an earthen dam. It is not concrete. It is not steel. It is a massive wall of compacted soil and rock. These types of dams are common in agricultural areas because they are cheaper to build, but they are also more vulnerable to failure, especially when water levels rise quickly. The dam was originally constructed in 1906 to create a reservoir for the Waialua Agricultural Company, which was eventually bought by Dole Food Company. Its purpose was to store water for sugarcane irrigation. It has been part of Hawaii's infrastructure for 120 years, and in 1921, it collapsed. Let me say that again. This dam has already failed once. It was rebuilt after that collapse, but the core vulnerability was never fully addressed. The spillway, which is the part of the dam that allows excess water to safely flow out during heavy rain, was never upgraded to modern safety standards. That is the detail that explains everything. Over the last 17 years, the state of Hawaii has been trying to force Dole to fix it. In 2009, state regulators issued the first deficiency notice. That is an official document that says this structure does not meet safety standards, and you are required to bring it into compliance. Dole did not. Another notice was issued, then another, then another. 4 deficiency notices total between 2009 and 2024. In 2021, 5 years ago, the state fined Dole $20,000 for failing to address the required safety improvements on time. $20,000 for a company that reported over $4 billion in revenue in 2025. That fine was less than a rounding error on a quarterly earnings report. Dan Nellis, Dole's general manager in Hawaii, told Honolulu Civil Beat last week that the company had made what he called minor tweaks to the dam as state officials identified deficiencies. But he also acknowledged that the spillway, the most critical safety feature, had not been addressed, not upgraded, not repaired, not brought into compliance with the standards that the state said were necessary to prevent exactly what almost happened on March 20th. So why did Dole get away with this for 17 years? That is where the story gets even uglier. In 2023, the Hawaii State Legislature passed a bill authorizing the state to acquire the Wahiawa Dam from Dole. The deal worked like this. Dole would donate the dam, the reservoir, and the ditch system to the state. In exchange, the state would agree to make all the required repairs and upgrades. The cost to taxpayers, $5 million to purchase the spillway, and $21 million to repair and expand it to meet dam safety requirements. So Dole, which had been legally required to make those repairs for more than a decade, was allowed to simply hand the problem to the state and walk away. And here's the part that should make every taxpayer in Hawaii furious. After the legislature approved the acquisition deal, the State Land Board removed the threat of future penalties against Dole for noncompliance. Let me break that down. Dole ignored 4 deficiency notices. Dole paid a $20,000 fine and kept ignoring the problem. Then, when the state finally decided to take over the dam, regulators stopped holding Dole accountable. The company faced no criminal charges, no additional fines, no requirement to reimburse the state for the cost of the repairs they were supposed to have made. They just got to walk away. And the people who live downstream got to find out whether a 120-year-old earthen dam with a deficient spillway could hold back a record-breaking rainstorm. On Friday morning, it almost didn't. Water levels inside the reservoir climbed rapidly. Overnight, the dam went from 79 feet to 84 feet. By mid-morning, it had topped 85 feet. That left just 5 feet of freeboard. Freeboard is the vertical distance between the water level and the top of the dam. It is your margin of safety. When that number gets small, engineers start using words like imminent failure. Because earthen dams do not fail gradually, they fail catastrophically. If water starts flowing over the top of an earthen dam, it begins eroding the structure. That erosion accelerates. Within minutes, the entire wall can give way, releasing millions of gallons of water in a single wave. Everything downstream gets obliterated. The Wahiawa Reservoir holds enough water to fill more than 4,500 Olympic swimming pools. If that dam had breached, the towns of Waialua and Halewa would have been hit by a wall of water moving faster than anyone could run. There would have been no second warning. There would have been no time to evacuate. The people who did not leave when the sirens went off would have drowned. Kathleen Pahinui is a resident of Waialua. She evacuated early Friday morning. In an interview with the Associated Press, she said the aging dam is a concern every time it rains. Every single time. She knows the history. She knows the warnings have been ignored. And she knows that one day the rain might not stop in time. Just pray for us, she told the reporter. We understand there's more rain coming. She was right. By Saturday morning, the rain had picked up again. Water levels in the dam, which had dropped slightly Friday evening, began rising once more. The National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning with light to moderate showers expected to turn heavy in some places. Molly Pierce, a spokesperson for the Oahu Department of Emergency Management, said Saturday morning that the dam appeared to be less of a concern than the breadth of hazardous conditions across the island. But she also said this: we're seeing the waters receding in a lot of places. But again, with that saturation, just the smallest amount of water can bring those raging back up. So even if it's blue skies where you are, I think we all know in Hawaii that if rain is falling on the mountain, it's coming to you soon enough. That is the reality for anyone living below the Wahiawa Dam. The threat is not over. The spillway has not been fixed. The repairs have not been made. The state now owns the dam, but the $21 million in upgrades are still years away from completion. And in the meantime, every time it rains, the people of Waialua and Halewa have to wonder if this is the storm that finally breaks it. More than 200 people were rescued from floodwaters across Oahu on Friday and Saturday. The National Guard and Honolulu Fire Department airlifted 72 children and adults from a spring break youth camp at a retreat on Oahu's west coast. Firefighters and lifeguards on jet skis searched flooded neighborhoods for people who had been stranded. Ian Shuring, spokesperson for Honolulu, told reporters that there were reports of homes being swept away, but the agency did not yet know how many. No deaths were reported, which is frankly a miracle given the speed and scale of the flooding, but the damage is severe. Governor Green said the cost of the storm could top $1 billion. That includes damage to airports, schools, roads, homes, and a hospital on Maui and Kula that had to relocate patients because of flooding. Dozens, and perhaps hundreds of homes have been damaged. Officials have not yet completed a full assessment because some areas are still underwater or inaccessible. On the island of Maui, authorities upgraded an evacuation advisory to a warning for parts of Lahaina, the town that is still recovering from the deadly 2023 wildfire, because retention basins were nearing capacity. This is not just a weather story, this is an infrastructure failure story, and it is a corporate accountability story. Because Dole Food Company had 17 years to fix this dam. They had the money, they had the engineering capability, they had the legal obligation, and they chose not to do it. Instead, they made minor tweaks. They paid a $20,000 fine. And then they waited until the state agreed to take the dam off their hands and pay for the repairs with taxpayer money. Here is what that decision looks like in human terms. Families packing their cars in the middle of the night, not knowing if their homes will still be there when they come back. Children being airlifted out of a youth camp because the roads are underwater and there is no other way out. Residents like Kathleen Pahanui saying, just pray for us, because they know their government and the corporation that put them in danger have both failed them. The state regulates 132 dams across Hawaii. Most of them were built as part of irrigation systems for the sugarcane industry, according to a 2019 infrastructure report by the American Society of Civil Engineers. Many of those dams are more than a century old. Many of them are earthen dams, and many of them have not been upgraded to modern safety standards. The Wahiawa Dam is not an isolated case. It is a warning. Climate change is making storms more intense. Hawaii is seeing bigger rainfall totals in shorter periods of time. The kind of storm that used to happen once every 50 years is now happening every 10 years. And the infrastructure that was built to handle the old normal cannot handle the new one. That is true for dams. It is true for drainage systems. It is true for roads and bridges and levees. The question is not whether the next big storm will come. The question is whether the infrastructure will hold when it does. And when that infrastructure is owned by a corporation that has spent 17 years ignoring safety warnings, the answer is obvious. It will not hold. Not unless someone forces them to fix it. And in Hawaii, no one did. The state issued deficiency notices, the state issued fines, and then the state gave up and agreed to take over the problem themselves. That is how you end up with 5,500 people evacuating in the middle of the night while a 120-year-old dam sits 5 feet away from catastrophic failure. Now let's talk about what comes next. There are 3 realistic scenarios. Scenario 1, the weather improves, the rain stops. Water levels in the Wahiawa Reservoir drop back to safe levels. The immediate threat passes. Residents are allowed to return home. Cleanup begins. The state moves forward with its plan to repair the spillway over the next several years. Life goes back to normal. But here's the problem with that scenario. Normal is gone. Because even if the spillway gets repaired, even if the dam is brought into full compliance with modern safety standards, the people who live downstream now know how close they came. They know their government let a corporation ignore safety warnings for 17 years. They know that when the crisis finally arrived, the margin of safety was 5 feet. And they know that the next storm is coming. That is not a recovery. That is living under a permanent threat. Scenario 2, the weather worsens. Another storm system moves in before the reservoir has a chance to drain. Water levels rise again. This time, they top 90 feet. The dam begins overtopping, which means water is flowing over the crest. Erosion starts. Engineers issue a final warning. Everyone downstream is told to run, and then the dam fails. The wall of water obliterates everything in its path. Homes, roads, power lines, people. The death toll is measured in dozens, maybe hundreds. It becomes one of the deadliest infrastructure disasters in modern American history, and the investigations that follow reveal what we already know. This was preventable. Dole knew, the state knew, and no one did what was necessary to stop it. Scenario 3, the long-term threat. This is the scenario that almost no one is talking about, but it is the most important one. Even if the Wahiawa Dam does not fail this time, even if the state completes the $21 million in repairs, the broader problem remains. Hawaii has 132 regulated dams. Most of them are old. Many of them are earthen dams built for agricultural irrigation. Many of them have not been inspected or upgraded in decades. Climate change is making storms more frequent and more intense. Water levels are going to spike like this again. And the next time, it might not be the Wahiawa Dam. It might be a dam that no one is watching. A dam that does not make headlines until it is too late. That is the real crisis. Not just this dam, not just this storm, but the systemic failure to invest in the infrastructure that keeps people safe. And when corporations are allowed to defer maintenance, ignore warnings, and walk away from their legal obligations, the result is exactly what we saw on March 20th. Sirens, evacuations, rescues, and a community that will never feel safe again. Everything in this video comes from public sources, official agency reports, credible news outlets, documented government records. If you are in an affected area, follow your local emergency management instructions. This channel exists to document what is happening. What you do with that information is your choice. Let me bring this back to the bigger picture. Dole Food Company is a multinational corporation with operations in more than 80 countries. They reported $6.5 billion in net revenue in 2023. They are not a small company struggling to make ends meet. They are a global player in the food industry. And yet, when faced with a legal requirement to repair a dam that posed a threat to thousands of people, they chose to defer. They chose to delay. They chose to pay a $20,000 fine rather than spend the money to fix the problem. And then, when the state offered them an out, they took it. They donated the dam. They walked away. And they left the people of Waialua and Halewa to deal with the consequences. That is not just negligence. That is a business decision, a calculated choice to prioritize profit over safety. And the reason they were able to make that choice is because the state of Hawaii let them. The state had the authority to shut down the dam if it did not meet safety standards. The state had the authority to impose much larger fines. The state had the authority to pursue criminal charges against corporate officers who failed to comply with safety regulations. But they did none of those things. Instead, they issued notices. They issued warnings. And then they agreed to take over the dam and pay for the repairs themselves. Why? Because Dole is a powerful company. Because Dole employs people. Because Dole has political influence. And because shutting down a dam or forcing a major corporation to spend tens of millions of dollars on infrastructure repairs is politically difficult. It is easier to kick the can down the road. It is easier to issue another warning. It is easier to hope that the next big storm does not come before the problem gets fixed. And that is exactly what happened. Until March 20th, 2026, when the storm did come and the dam came within 5 feet of killing everyone downstream. Here's the question you should be asking. If this happened in Hawaii, where else is it happening? How many other dams, bridges, levees, and water systems are being maintained by corporations that are deferring repairs, ignoring warnings, and waiting for someone else to take over the problem? How many other communities are living 5 feet away from disaster and do not even know it? Because this is not unique to Dole. This is not unique to Hawaii. This is how infrastructure failure happens in America. Slowly, quietly, one deferred repair at a time, until the moment it is not quiet anymore, until the sirens go off and people are told to evacuate in the middle of the night. And by then, it is too late to fix it. The people of Waialua and Halewa got lucky. The dam did not fail. The rain stopped just in time. Water levels dropped just enough. But luck is not a plan. Luck is not infrastructure. And luck eventually runs out. So what happens next time? What happens when the next storm rolls in and the reservoir fills up again and the spillway still has not been repaired? What happens when the state has not yet completed the $21 million in upgrades that were supposed to have been done 15 years ago? What happens when the people downstream are told once again to evacuate, and this time, some of them do not make it out? That is the question Hawaii needs to answer. That is the question Dole needs to answer. And that is the question every community in America living downstream of aging infrastructure needs to start asking right now. Because the next dam that fails might not give anyone a warning. It might not give anyone 5 feet. It might just break. And when it does, the investigations will reveal the same thing they always do. We knew this was coming, and we chose not to stop it. Dole received 4 deficiency notices over 17 years and made 0 required repairs. Should the executives face criminal charges? Yes or no, and why? Drop your answer in the comments, because this is not just about one dam in Hawaii. This is about whether corporations can be held accountable when they put thousands of lives at risk to save money. If you're someone who follows these stories not because they are entertaining, but because you believe people deserve to know what is actually happening, this channel is for you. Hit subscribe. Because the next story we are tracking involves a Texas city that could run completely out of water by November 2026, triggering an economic collapse that could shut down refineries, spike gas prices nationwide, and force a mass evacuation. And just like Hawaii, the warning signs have been there for years. The Wahiawa Dam did not fail on March 20th, but it came close, 5 feet close. And the people who live downstream will remember that for the rest of their lives. They will remember the sirens. They will remember the evacuation. They will remember the moment they realized that their safety was never the priority. And they will remember that when the rain comes again, there's no guarantee the dam will hold. That is the legacy of 17 years of corporate negligence and government failure. Not just a close call, but a permanent loss of trust. And in a place like Hawaii, where storms are getting stronger and infrastructure is getting older, trust is the one thing you cannot afford to lose.